So Danny Richie from GR Research just put out a video last week all about my Arcus speaker, and he spent the first few minutes of it on the one thing that most people really never think about when they're shopping for a speaker. Not the driver, not the crossover, but the cabinet itself, the box. Now, I don't come at speakers from the audio side. I come at them from the manufacturing side. Decades building things out of cast composites, tooling, materials, production parts. So when Danny starts breaking down the cabinet resonance, he's describing the exact problem the Arcus speaker was built to solve. So stick with me here, because he builds the whole case, and then I'll show you what I did about it.
A design element that's most overlooked in loudspeaker design is the construction of the cabinet. And the way the cabinet is constructed, the materials that are used, how well it's braced, has an enormous effect on how things sound. And I did a video, it's been months and months back, where it was two videos. I broke it up into two sections, and they were really long, and they had to do with distortion. And I took you from distortions that are the least egregious, like the distortions that aren't as significant, all the way up to the largest types of distortion that really can wreck the sound. And pretty high up on the list was cabinet resonances. Cabinet resonances can completely make or break the sound of a speaker, and I see it in here all the time because I have speakers sent in, and I measure and test them, and I look at how they're constructed, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at one and say, oh yeah, that's going to resonate. That's going to be bad. Especially a lot of the vintage speakers that are out there, they were very lightly constructed, no bracing, and man, they would resonate like crazy. Well, the worst that I ever measured in here was a Klipsch Scala, and the output levels of the resonances were almost as loud as some of the output levels that I measured from the woofer. It was way up there in output. It buzzed like crazy, and each panel had a specific resonant frequency, and it wasn't just a peak at that resonance. It was fairly broad, and it was nasty. But almost every speaker, even the ones that are fairly well braced, all have a resonance frequency. Each panel on each speaker has a resonance frequency, and some are a lot worse than others. And I know a lot of you look in there and think, oh, it's MDF, it's got a brace, it's going to be fine. That's not a factor. That's typically not true. When we look at types of distortion, and I know there's a big focus out there in the audio community on harmonic distortion, and there's a couple guys with Klippel measurement systems, and they can measure harmonic distortions, and in a kind of way, like they're extrapolating and using the software to remove all the room reflections that are contaminating that type of measurement, and it's kind of extrapolating what those harmonic distortions are in kind of a calculated way. And it can give you some meaningful data that make comparisons, but those are usually like at 1 or 2% distortion. They're well down in output. It's very hard to hear harmonics and separate that from harmonics that are within the structure of the music themselves. Cabinet resonances are very easy to separate from the input signal. It's adding a separate coloration that is completely separate from the harmonic structure that's within the music itself. And it's usually at a much higher magnitude. I see often cabinet resonances in the 10 to 15 dB range often when measuring a speaker. Sometimes there's 20 dB of output coming from the cabinet resonances themselves.
So everything that Danny just laid out, that's exactly the problem I built this cabinet to kill. A box that rings colors everything coming out of it, and it doesn't matter how good your drivers are if the cabinet is fighting you. Now, Danny calls me Concrete Steve, and I'll own that because that's how this started. I came to him and I said, I can cast a concrete speaker, but on my own channel, I got one correction to make. It's not really concrete like you know it, it's more considered mineral cast. So when people hear cast, they picture the concrete in their driveway, and that's nothing like this. This is an industrial grade cast material. It's engineered to be far stronger and denser than anything you'd pour at home. But for a speaker, strength isn't even the point. It's the density and the stability. It just doesn't ring the way a wood panel does. And that's really all you need to know. Here's how Danny describes the thinking behind a cabinet like this.
When we're designing speakers, that they're well made, that they're well braced, and that we're pushing resonances up into a higher frequency range where a product like no-res can completely eat them up. Something that's well braced where the panels are smaller. Each section on that panel between braces, the resonant frequency is much higher resonance than if it was an unbraced large panel. The freer resonance is much lower. And when it's lower, it's really harder to control because of the flexing of the panel, and you can have harmonics of that resonance. You may have a resonance and then a secondary or third harmonic of that resonance that adds additional coloration to the sound. So we spend a lot of time focusing on that aspect. So I was really excited when Steve, and we call him Concrete Steve, contacted me and said he could do speakers out of concrete. He was 3D printing these molds.
Now I got to clear one thing up because Danny said it and it's really only half the story. So when we're prototyping, yes, I 3D print the molds, and that's a fast, easy way to test a shape, dial in the design, and make sure everything fits before you commit to anything. But that's not how the production speakers are made. Once the design gets locked in, I cut hard production tooling, real tooling, built to run parts over and over, with the surface finish and the repeatability you need when you're actually shipping a product. 3D printing just doesn't do that way. It's not stable enough long term, and it's really just best for prototyping. The 3D printer is for figuring it all out. The production tools are for building it right every single time. So Danny took the first cabinet, dropped the drivers in, and put it through its paces. And here's what he found.
I got really excited about that because I knew that was going to be a real performance advantage in a lot of ways, to have not only cool shapes, but have a really resonant free cabinet that will have none of that distortion from cabinet wall resonances. So got together with Steve, we did some prototypes and some testing. I did a couple of models where I designed some crossovers for it. We did accelerometer testing. I used a regular XLS Encore that was braced and had no res, compared that to a concrete cabinet that had nothing inside other than just some insulation inside, and the results were really promising. Like, wow, this really knocks the lower region resonances completely out. And so we built some speakers for him, and then he decided, hey, let's take this performance-wise to the highest level as far as drivers and crossover parts and things like that. Let's make this into not a cheap speaker, but a really, really high-end speaker, which involves high-quality parts, tube connectors, high-quality internal wire, all of that good stuff. Stuff that you see us typically use in upgrades and that we use in our own products. So I said, hey, we could put a planar magnetic tweeter in there. Let's put our GR Neo 3 in there, and you can mold a waveguide for that right into the concrete. So it made it a unique situation where this could be done in the design and not an add-on where we've got a hole and we're having to mount a waveguide in there. And he came up with an interesting way to mount the Neo 3. It actually slides in a little tray from the woofer hole, slides up inside and screws down. He 3D prints some of those things that hold it. It was ingenious. It worked really well. It didn't leak. It was really cool. So this was the test meal he sent me, and I dropped all the drivers in this thing, put some insulation in, and designed a crossover for it. It came out fantastic. Again, the concrete, you can hear it. It's more of a higher frequency ring, so it gets all that resonance out of the vocal region. It pushes it way up there where it's less excited, and then the no-res completely eats it up. So huge advantage over other types of building materials.
So let me show you what he was just reacting to. So the whole cabinet starts in CAD. I design every curve, every internal feature. Then the main section is cast as one single piece. so the mass and the curved geometry are doing the work that the bracing has to fight for in a wood box. And casting let me do something I really wanted to do for this speaker. Danny's Neo 3 tweeter needs a waveguide, and there's more than one way to do that. So you can either 3D print a waveguide and mount it to the baffle, and that works great, but since I'm already casting the cabinet, I wanted that waveguide molded right into the face, part of the cabinet itself, one clean, continuous surface. To me, that's the look I was going for. No separate piece sitting on the front. It just flows. I want to thank this week's sponsor, Pale Blue Batteries. They've got these really cool batteries that have a USB-C charging port right on the battery. No need for a wall charger. Just take a power bank on the go and have power anytime you need it. Pale Blue Batteries, they're awesome. So that's my portion of the speaker. The cabinet, the materials, the tooling, the mounting, everything you can touch. But a great cabinet is only part of the speaker. Here's the one thing I'm honest about. I'm not a crossover designer. I'm not an acoustic engineer. That's just not my lane. And I'm not going to pretend that it is. So when it came to the drivers and the crossover, I didn't guess. I went straight to Danny. The M165 woofer, the Neo 3 tweeter, and a crossover Danny designed and voiced specifically for this cabinet, not one off the shelf and built for this speaker. That's the part I'd never try to do myself, and it's the part that turns a good sounding box into something you'd actually want to live with. And when Danny puts a speaker on the bench, he measures everything. There's one number in here I care about the most, and I'll tell you what it is when he gets to it. But let him walk you through this whole picture first.
Let's throw up the measurements on these and take a look at it. And that's another aspect, of course, of speaker design. I'm really pleased with how these measure. Let's look at the on-axis frequency response, of course, nice and flat. Keep in mind that we're looking at this at a 5 dB scale, so I'm zoomed in on the measurement. So if you compare it to measurements other companies take, it may look a little choppy or a little rougher. It's because we're zoomed in. We're not zoomed out on 10 dB per line, making it look flat, 100 dB range. This is a 25 dB range, so we're zoomed in to look at this stuff. Looking at the crossover response, you can see crossover points fairly low. That tweeter, and it has a low order filter. That tweeter is reaching way on down there. That brings detail levels and clarity to the picture that typically a woofer would be producing if you did a comparison to another two-way speaker. That tweeter can handle a lot, and it sounds really good. It's one of the best sounding tweeters on the market. That crossover point's around 1700 hertz or something like that. And then let's look at the horizontal off axis. That means as you move left or right, it drops off extremely well, real evenly. So it's maintaining a constant response in the horizontal plane that's really good. Also, same with the vertical. The vertical off axis is really good. You've got to get pretty far off axis in height to start seeing a little bit of a drop out there between the drivers. Some of that's indicative of the lower crossover point, so the wavelengths are a little longer at the crossover point. So it's better in that category also than a lot of other speakers that we test. Impedance looks great. It's a smooth, balanced impedance, balanced on both ends. And the spectral decay. The spectral decay looks fantastic. That's how fast those drivers are settling. The M165 that we're using is always great in that regard. And the planar magnetic tweeter, of course, is a low moving mass, and it's got that just grip force of motor structure on both sides of it. So it exhibits really high control, and it's really fast and detailed, but it's not harsh or bright. It's a smooth sounding tweeter. It's my favorite tweeter of all the tweeters out there.
That spectral decay plot he just showed, that's the one I was talking about. That's how fast everything stops moving and goes quiet. A cabinet that rings shows up right there, and the Arcus just doesn't. And that's the whole reason I started casting speakers in the first place. And the best part is you don't have to take my word for it. You can check out the measurements. They're right there. So that's the Arcus speaker. Danny's drivers, Danny's crossover, my cabinet. But there's one thing about casting I haven't shown you yet. And it's the part I think is actually the most fun. When you're not cutting and gluing flat panels, you're not stuck building a box. You can build almost any shape you want. And shape isn't just about looks, the shape itself changes how a speaker behaves. That topic is for next time. We're going to get into cabinet shapes, why most speakers are boxes, why they don't have to be, and what casting lets me do that a saw and a bottle of glue never could. Thanks for watching. Go check out the Arcus at StoneSonicAudio.com, and I'll see you on the next one.